Right now, a very important and pressing issue, and one that we continue to talk about here to enlighten the audience, and it may enrage you as well, but if it does, you probably need to search your soul. And we're going to welcome your calls, challenges, comments, and criticisms during this half hour at 977-1070. He's with us by phone. He's a friend of this community. Although he has relocated out of the community, he remains involved here in pro-life activities. Steve Lopez is with us and here in studio, and you've heard her tell her story before on this program. Martha Cassell is with us. And thank you, Steve and Martha, for joining us today on the Schilling Show.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be here.
It is good to have you here. I'm going to ask you to pull that. I should have told you in advance right up there so you can't be too close to that microphone. We want everybody to hear what you have to say today. Steve, I know many people know your name, and as I mentioned, you're a friend of this community. You've done so much here with the pro-life community and for the unborn, the helpless, the innocents that are being killed in 3 locations, which we'll get to in a few minutes here locally in Charlottesville. Tell us about your endeavors and the things that you've been working on in a new location.
Well, I'm like Martha, a pro-life volunteer. I moved out to Dallas, where they have the same problem. They have the scourge of abortion. And they have a very active pro-life community. They have sidewalk counselors, full-time sidewalk counselors at all of the abortion clinics in the city, which is nice. So they actually end up having a lot of, I think their saves are probably the highest in the United States as a result of that. But I do keep tabs on what's going on back in Virginia. And, of course, recently we discussed the unfortunate numbers in Charlottesville. Although across the state of Virginia, abortions are down. In Charlottesville, it's a little bit of a different story.
Yeah, we're going to get into that in just a few moments. You're so good at the sidewalk stories and the vignettes of what's been going on, and you send these out to encourage people. Do you have a recent sidewalk story that you could tell us from your own interaction, or a story that you've heard from the pro-life folks?
Yeah, I mean, out in Dallas, I've seen just, every week I see people turn their, come to get an abortion. And they actually changed the laws in Texas so they have to see a sonogram. And the last time I was in front of an abortion facility a few days ago, 2 women saw the sonogram and came out crying, and they changed their mind. I think, Martha, you have a story from just yesterday, right?
Oh, from last night?
Yes, tell us what happened. This would be locally.
Yeah, this was just last night, as a matter of fact. A mother was out there at the clinic, and she was hysterical because her daughter had come in for her 8th abortion. And praise God, she was rescued by the mother of the father of the child. And so she did not actually have the abortion, but the mother was very fearful because there were some difficult facts of the family that were very painful and difficult. Life is tough, there's all kinds of suffering out there, but it's not bad enough to kill a baby over. So
yeah, it's a good way to put it, and I think part of the problem, Steve and Martha, and you know this, but I'm speaking to the audience right now, is that people don't want to face what it is they're doing. They want to pretend like, well, if we don't look at it, it's not there. And they want to pretend like children are fungible, which they're absolutely not, which astounds me. And I talked about this yesterday, about people who adopt kids, and we have local elected officials who have done this, adopt a child and then say, I favor a woman's right to choose. I mean, what you're basically doing is telling me that your child is fungible, that it could have been swapped out for any other child and you'd be just as happy. Right.
That's right. Yeah, it's a real problem, this attitude that people have. That children are not one of a kind, not unique, and they absolutely are. One of the strangest responses that I get when I say to people out there waiting for an abortion is that adoption is the most selfless, courageous, and loving thing to do. And the response I get so often is, nobody else is going to raise my child. So they would rather kill their child than allow someone who can't have a child to adopt.
Well, I guess it goes to what you just said about that being a very selfless act and giving your child to somebody else. But what greater act of love than making that sacrifice? I mean, it might be hard for you to live knowing that you had a child out there somewhere and you didn't know, you couldn't say hello to him or her, and that's not always the case, but sometimes it is. But how much harder it would be to live and knowing that you had stopped a child in the midst of its development and from ever existing.
Right, that's right. And it doesn't go away. That's the thing that people delude themselves into thinking, that you can have an abortion and you can just go to bed, go out, have a nice dinner, and it's over. But it's not over. It'll come back to haunt you by the grace of God, so that you can ask for forgiveness and get some healing and hopefully back on your way to heaven.
We're talking with Steve Lopez and Martha Cassell on a Pro-Life Update here in Charlottesville, and there's an event coming up, 40 Days for Life, which we'll get to in a few moments. But I think this is an important component of the conversation, and I'd like to say this every time we're talking about this, because people get very nervous about this subject. Again, they don't want to think about what it is that they're advocating for. But this is not an effort, and it never has been, to condemn people who have had an abortion. Because as you said, there's forgiveness. There's forgiveness for every sin, and this is one of them. There is forgiveness for people who seek it. So that's not what this is about. But I think what we do here is we try to correct people in calling right wrong and wrong right. The people who somehow are proud of this, who are saying this is fine, there's nothing wrong with it, or maybe there's just a little something wrong with it. And you speak from experience, and we've covered your story here on the program before, but I think it's important to remind the audience, Martha, that you indeed had an abortion in your past.
I had an abortion over 30 years ago, and I've been through a lot of healing for that. And it's the biggest mistake of my life, the greatest moral evil that I've ever committed, as far as I know. And I still regret it. I will always regret it, because I have 3 incredible children today who have been denied the privilege of yet another sibling, a sibling that God had planned to be in our family. And I am no one to make that decision. These children are all created by God. He knows each and every one of us before he forms us in the womb. Each one is precious and special, and he has a plan for each one. And that's what we need to yield to. That's what we need to trust. And especially Christians, the fact that anyone can call themselves a Christian and come out with this pro-choice rhetoric, it defies understanding. I can't grasp it. I don't know where they're coming from. What we have is a choice, really, as a Christian, to do what's right, and to try to please God and to be in accordance with his will. What we have to do, if we make a mistake, if we sin, if we fall, then we have to take responsibility for what we've done. And taking the life of another person is shunning that responsibility.
Absolutely it is, and these are heartfelt words. And, you know, I know you, and you and I have spoken about this in the past, Martha, and I know that you're still pained over what happened, but you also have a peace about you, because you know you've been forgiven. Yes,
I do know that. I do know that. And that's the main reason I'm out there on the sidewalk at the Commonwealth Drive facility on Wednesday nights, is because I love those people. I especially love the clinic workers. They really break my heart, because they're like St. Paul, as I mentioned on the program last time. He was blind to what he was doing. He thought he was helping people, and that's what these clinic workers think. They think they are helping people. The doctor was out there last night. He stopped on the way out and offered us peaches, as he was leaving last night. We've had many conversations with him. He is a Christian, but he just doesn't seem to believe in heaven or hell. You know, that's another facet.
Then I would call it a nominal Christian. Because,
right, exactly.
You know, the foundation of Christianity is the belief in an afterlife that was given to us through the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. 977-1070 is the phone number. It's 1244 here on the Schilling Show. We're talking with Martha Cassell, Steve Lopez. A pro-life update from Charlottesville and beyond, also the 40 Days for Life event that's coming up. But I think greater than any event is an understanding and a lesson for the listening members of this audience who are saying, what is this all about, and is my position tenable? And I think you need to think about that. Give us a call if you want to challenge, if you think Planned Parenthood is a great thing and you support them and that point of view. We would love to have the discussion with you right here on the air. Bruce stands by at 977-1070. And when the Schilling Show returns, we're going to find out the latest numbers on abortions here in Charlottesville. Who are the providers of this horrible quote-unquote service, and what are those numbers? We'll get an update from Steve Lopez when the Schilling Show returns. And we're continuing conversation with Steve Lopez on the long line, the newsmaker line from Texas. Martha Cassell with us here in studio. We're giving you a pro-life update and what's going on with the abortion numbers here in Charlottesville. Steve, you'd send out a little note to people with some, I guess it's sad news. It's disappointing and sad, but let's talk about it. There are actually 3 abortion providers here in this general area.
Yep, that's correct. Charlottesville isn't a huge city by any means. They do surprisingly have 3 abortion providers.
Let's talk about, first of all, Commonwealth Clinic. Is that a private provider, and what were the numbers there over the past year?
Yep, that's a private provider. The abortionist there is named Dr. Fitchu, and that's kind of the silver lining in the news. That's where Martha and several other awesome pro-lifers have been standing every Wednesday evening from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m., which is when he does the abortions. Mm-hmm. And the numbers, that's the only clinic where the numbers went down. It went from 415 in 2010 to 370 abortions in 2011.
Well, you know, when we think about it, it's a significant percentage of decline, but it's still 1 baby a day, in essence, that's being killed at this place, and that's way too many. Right, and that particular doctor has several other clinics, and he does several thousand abortions every year, and he just comes to Charlottesville 1 day a week. We spend so much effort in the United States of America on saving preemies, as they're called, children that are born early. We have in utero operations now where they go in and spend sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars to save the life of a baby who's in the womb, who's having some distress for whatever reason it is. Our friend, the late Dr. Gary Helmbrecht, used to do many of those sorts of operations, and what a blessing he was. And yet we have people who pay hundreds of dollars to do just the opposite. Yeah, unfortunately, and this is where we reach the hearts and minds of the people, that, you know, these babies are not a curse. These babies are blessings. Yes. And I think we have an attitude, and some of it has to do with, you know, some of the misinformation that groups like Planned Parenthood have put out there as to, like, you know, we need to worry about just the woman's future, and it's an imaginary future, right? And you listen to Martha talk about the reality of what her future was. It's also a lot of heartbreak, right, when the mothers and the fathers eventually come to terms with what they did, because the abortionist has an incentive to misinform everyone that it's going to be this no problem, you just come in for a procedure, you'll walk out the door and you'll be fine. They walk out the door crying. Those relationships, when you see the boyfriends or the mothers and the fathers coming out in their cars, their relationship is never the same. So if you're concerned about your relationship with your girlfriend, the worst thing that you could possibly do for your relationship is kill the child that you both created through your free will. Yes, these you say the relationships are never the same, and I would say in probably a good number of cases the relationships are permanently destroyed, that there is no further ability for these two people to have a relationship, or at least to have a loving relationship. Martha, I don't know if you've seen this happen in the past or if you have any personal experience, but I would imagine that this is devastating to interpersonal relationships. I would say it's most definitely devastating to interpersonal relationships. I'm living a miracle. My husband and I are defying all the statistics. And it does happen because God is so gracious and so good. And because he came into my life in such a powerful way after this happened. And so I think I'm an exception. But that's the kind of thing I'd like to learn more about as I get to know more people who are suffering from the aftermath of abortion. Steve Lopez, let's talk about this bastion of evil known as Planned Parenthood. We seem to have now a political party who has staked its claim on this being a great organization that we need to support with public dollars. What are the numbers going on in the Albemarle County location at Planned Parenthood regarding abortions? Yeah, okay, so despite Planned Parenthood's rhetoric of it being safe and rare, the numbers are up 25% from 563 in 2010 to 706 innocent babies in 2011, which is an increase of, like I said, 25%. Have you ever heard anybody from this organization saying why they believe it should be rare? I think that's just that's the rhetoric that they say just to make it just as kind of to sound politically correct, because they have no economic incentive to make it rare. And if you look at
their statistics, they have a 50% recidivism rate, or repeat customers. So they talk about education. If they're doing this wonderful education, why do half the people that come there come back again for another abortion? And half of the people that come into their clinics were using no form of birth control, and yet those numbers remain the same. So 25% were there before. They didn't use birth control and came back again and did the same mistake. So none of their rhetoric actually adds up other than the money that they can make. So if you look at the numbers, they have an incentive to do as many abortions as they can, but that doesn't sound politically correct. But if you look at what's happening in Charlottesville, bucking the trend, statewide, their business is booming.
How about the University of Virginia? And we've got just a couple of minutes left with Steve Lopez and Martha Cassell, because I think that people would be shocked. This is a state-funded university, and they're doing abortions at the University of Virginia Medical Center.
Yes, and there's been groups that have been trying to bring this to light, especially Sean Cannon and his group. But unfortunately, those numbers are up even 31% at UVA. They went from 57 to 75 in 2011. And that's a whole other issue, because, the college students, a lot of them are obviously pro-life, but they have a university where, babies are being sacrificed.
Yeah, it's just awful to consider that that's going on at Thomas Jefferson's University. And so let's wrap this up, because there's an event coming up called 40 Days for Life. It is certainly a commitment of the local pro-life community. This goes on across the country. But, Martha, would you give us the details so people can put it on their calendar?
Right. 40 Days for Life will begin this year on September 26th and end on November 4th, just 2 days before the election. And it's a peaceful prayer vigil in front of Planned Parenthood on a hydraulic road. And we'll be sending out emails to people who are on our list. But if you are not yet on our list and would like to be, you can email to Seville 40 Days for Life at, what is that, Steve? You were going to get that address.
The email address there is Seville 40 Days, and that's the number 40 days at gmail.com.
Thank you.
And we hope that people will participate, and we'll have you back again before the event to let people know how they can get involved directly and get their churches involved. But this is certainly an issue for the churches, for God's people to rise up, and for those so-called pro-choice churches, you're really pro-death, and shame on you. Shame, shame, shame. And there are a lot of them right here in Charlottesville, a city that is surrounded and enveloped by a spiritual darkness. And I think any person of faith would be listening to me right now knows exactly what I'm talking about. Steve Lopez, hey, it's been great to catch up with you. You're still a good friend of this community, even in absentia in Texas. We're so glad that you are participating here in the local pro-life movement as well. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks a lot, Rob. Hopefully someday you'll have your shows out here in Dallas. Well,
I hope that we will, and we'll certainly continue to work on that. And Martha Cassell, thank you as well for being with us. It's hard to talk about these things, but it's so important that you're willing to step forward and tell your own story. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
That is going to wrap up this hour of the Schilling Show. We are heading now to news and weather at the top of the hour. Hey, if you disagree with what you have just heard, we welcome your calls right at the top of the hour. Bruce is there. I'd love to speak with you on the air about it. 977-1070. The intellectual activist Robert Trzynski will be here with us to discuss Paul Ryan and the upcoming election. Hey, much more of the Schilling Show straight ahead.